It's great to see everybody come here today. And when I got the chance to moderate this panel, we did a prep session last week, and I saw who was on it. I thought, wow, especially as an uncouth American, this is the center of all the news in the world right now over here in Europe. And to be able to talk about energy and ESG with companies in the middle of it is going to be super exciting. So without further ado, let me introduce my colleagues coming up. So for the first is Alexandra Tarmo. She's head of partnerships and social procurement at Unilever. Please welcome Alexandra. The second is Gregor Stühler, who's CEO and co-founder of Scoutbee. And Nicole Seitz, who is vice president of supply chain management at Siemens Energy. So we've got a big topic. We're going to talk about how to put data first and eventually get into the how of that with AI. But first, I'd really like to bring the topic of this alive, given the panelists up here on stage. So what I'd like to do is put data around suppliers and procurement in the context of current events. So much is going on in the world. I had a chance to sit on Eloise Epstein's presentation this morning, kind of a history lesson. But right now, if we look at the energy crisis in Europe, the threat of Russia, competing priorities with ESG, we're dealing with data that's bigger than ever before in terms of data sets, currency, everything else. So to kick it off, I'd like to start asking each of the panelists, what are your burning platforms right now around your suppliers and data? And then we can get into the weeds from there. So starting with Nicole.
Okay, so the most problems is that we have lots of data. Yeah? We have so much data everywhere. You get it from governments, official places, public places, then all the data internally in our company. And this we have to bring so together, and this is a big challenge, to bring it together that you can read it, that we can do something out of it, that we can track the right decisions out of it. And this is really challenging, and this is where we are needing so much a structural way on that. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Gregor?
Well, I guess we have our data under control, I hope. But what we see is overall an exponentially increase of data need. So if you look back in 2010, there was probably a need for taking care of the top 10% of your tier ones and maybe a couple of data points. And now in 2022, you probably have to take care of all of your tier ones. Those are tens of thousands of data points with hundreds of data points related to it, certificates and so on. And then also tier two. So that's a rise from like 1,000 to 2,000 data points to probably billions of data points. And that's the overall challenge where I think that the current technology ecosystem is not prepared for.
Fantastic. And Alexandra?
I agree. I think the big challenge we have is the amount of data we need to get from our extended supply chain. I think we heard here that a lot of the risk or the resilience issue or what we do on social and sustainability, we need to go to the tail that you normally don't collect data with. So it's getting the data, but I think the second biggest challenge is how you transfer data to a buyer that he can do something or she can do something with it.
Fantastic. So to unpack that a bit more, as we think about the kind of day-to-day challenges you have in your role, social procurement is a huge responsibility. And for folks who don't know Unilever, it is hundreds of brands, right? In different countries with different expectations around social. So would love to kind of hear from you, what are some of those day-to-day challenges specifically?
Yeah, so maybe let me tell you what social procurement, many people ask me why social and procurement are together. So we lead a couple of commitments around the S of the ESG, on living wage, on supply diversity, on human rights. So these are all, challenge where you need to really go again deep on your chain. And you always need to work with the data that exists and accept that not all the data are existing. And of course, the challenge or the beauty for us at Unilever is that we operate with 56,000 direct suppliers across country, and of course with many brands. So it's a massive scope where I believe we have a responsibility to try to get these 56,000 suppliers on board with us, that not only will impact our 66,000 suppliers, but all of their suppliers, which again, I'm back to my tier N challenge.
It's very significant. So, Gregor, you work with clients across industry, and to kind of categorize challenges into just a couple of buckets probably isn't a full enough data set. So, if you look at the headlines, how are folks using the capabilities today? Like, what are those areas which here and now, September 2022, are the biggest areas of opportunity in terms of looking at supplier data?
That's a tricky question. So overall, our company is roughly 7 years old, and we are right now in the 7th crisis that we've experienced. So there was a pandemic, there was the brutal war in Ukraine, there was a tariff war, there was a Suez Canal blockage. So there's always something going on. And I think the overall arching topic is that also when you look at ESG, it's a moving target. So you probably nobody would have expected that the European Supply Chain Act or the German Supply Chain Act would be that significant, and everybody was somewhat hit by surprise. So the meta topic that we usually advise our clients to is to invest overall in your data capability to make sure that you are able to work with the changing environment and to be able to proact instead of react. But being very specific today, I feel that ESG is a little bit falling behind now, behind optimization, risk, resilience, and also price optimizations. I hope that does not last. I hope that ESG is coming back on the top of the agenda. And overall, however, it's a general data topic, and I feel that the strategic procurement-related issues, no matter if it's risk, resilience, ESG, profit, or other topics, are always data-first topics. It's all upstream, not downstream.
Super helpful. And Nicole, looking at your role with supply chain and procurement, and Siemens Energy is huge, right? Giant supplier on the OEM side. What are some of those kind of joint intersection challenges around supplier data today?
Yeah, we are internationally on a global supplier basis on the way, so that brings a lot of problems. Yeah, we had these logistic and transport hiccups in China, and this was really a challenge for us. And the data there, to get it early and to react on that and to see if you can find alternatives or other opportunities. Yeah, this is the big thing we want to solve in our business. We want to find solutions together with startups, and with Scoutbee we already are on that way. Yeah? And this is something which is of essence in a company, that you get early warnings for that problems. And this is a big challenge, this early warning thing. Yeah?
Definitely. So Alexandra, and I'll kind of go down the list here. Obviously, there are tons of capabilities, kind of in-source, outsource around digital to deal with supplier data. So what are some of the initiatives you're thinking about around innovation, around supplier data, and bringing it together?
Yeah, so I think the challenge and the opportunity is to find new and diverse suppliers. And when I mean diverse with the big D. Because we have challenges around innovation that are all linked to sustainability, which we don't know the answer. And we can't continue just to go to the traditional supplier only to them. We need to get the ecosystem to work together. So of course, one of the reasons why we started working with Scoutbee was middle of the pandemic. It was because we needed immediately overnight to find supplier to continue to produce, sanitizer and disinfectant products. And we didn't have the capacity or the capability to do it. So this is how we implement Scoutbee, to find, in a very short time, new suppliers. And I think as we move now, so as Gregor said, it was resilience, then it was inflation, it's still inflation. Now we're moving much toward ESG challenges. We will continue to have this need to find suppliers that we don't know, and then bring them in, and then ensure that as we bring them in, they also respect all the things we need, so access to data from day one. So for me, it's also important that we capture the right data at the onboarding stage, if we can. because otherwise it's extremely time consuming for our team to just clean data. And then we would bring this supplier on board, and then with Scoutbee now we're looking about what do we do next, and then is leveraging the technology on saying, okay, now that we have them to find supplier, let's use them to find diverse supplier with our criteria we are defining on what is a diverse supplier for Unilever. And there is more to come, I'm sure.
Look forward to you unpacking that some more. So Gregor, we live in a world today of ERP, suites, best of breed. How do different types of solutions fit into solving this challenge of innovation?
Yeah, overall, procurement has, on supply chain also, invested a lot into downstream back in the days. So a lot of Jagger, Cooper, and SAP deployments, and those are all great solutions. But none of them are giving you a competitive edge when it comes to ESG-related topics. Coming back to my original statement also, no matter what strategic procurement challenge you have, it's always the same pattern. You need to consolidate your data, you need to match it with external data, you need to have a complete picture, not a data lake, but a complete picture, ideally with a knowledge graph of your internal supply base, and you have to connect it to the outside world to find new suppliers. And then no matter what use case you have, if it's about finding sustainable suppliers, if it's about finding diverse suppliers, you always start with your existing supply base and start how can I maybe shift also internal spend in order to be richer when it comes to spending money with diverse suppliers. And then if I do not have an internal solution, I go out and discover new suppliers. That's also why we have those two components, right? Scoutbee Intelligence, Scoutbee Discovery. Nevertheless, the data is usually scattered across systems. So there are a bunch of different ERP deployments. Usually data is sitting in Excel sheets. You have external data partners like Dun & Bradstreet, Supplier IO, etc., that you want to connect. And overall, this data problem is ever growing. And the ERPs and the existing solutions are a very, very important source to connect into the overall knowledge system that you have to build out in order to know where I have optimization pockets that I have to focus on. So nevertheless, they will not give you a competitive edge when it comes to trying to compete also on a ESG level, on a risks level, on a resilience level. This is a data topic. It's a data-first approach that you have to drive, and operation systems have the operations and resource planning in mind. That's why they were created in the first place.
Thanks for the history lesson on operational resource systems. I think Ariba was originally called ORMS, Operational Resource Management System, 25 years ago. So, Nicole, how do you look at your portfolio of innovative capabilities around supplier data?
Yes, regarding all this innovation, we set up a program in our Siemens Energy company, which is called Siemens Energy Venture, and you can all look up in a link there, where we get in contact with startups, with founders, with accelerators, new companies who have ideas to build new ideas, to bring it to market, to give our platform as a big company, let's say, to help them to bring it out and to have a win-win at the end. So this is a great chance. And yeah, we have also this venture clienting, which is called, and Scoutbee was one of the first companies we went through that. We came with a problem out of procurement for scouting, and then Scoutbee came over my way, and this was a perfect hit to bring this problem to a solution at the end. And it was a great success in the company. We saved a lot of time and found a lot of new suppliers.
That's great. One thing I'd like to ask later around it too is how does scouting of suppliers using data help de-risk the supply chain? Obviously, everyone up here is working with global customers with regional supply bases and global supply lanes, and the notion of identifying regional suppliers becomes key. But we can get to that in a minute. I'd like to jump. We were originally going to try and spend quite a bit of time on diversity and sustainability. So to jump into those questions, Alexandra, at Unilever, obviously you've got different regions, different brands, products. How do you look at kind of a federated approach to defining supplier diversity and sustainability?
We probably don't. So we of course have global targets. Many of them are external. public target. But the way we implement is that, and you heard Jennifer, no fits all. I mean, it's impossible to have one model that works, especially as you go towards social. So we're having a very by market, by country approach, which complexify also our challenge on data. So if I use supply diversity as an example, there is no definition of what is an ethnic minority supplier that is valid across the world. There is not even one which is valid across Europe. So we are at the moment deploying in Europe, and each country is a challenge in se. And I think in all this topic, you can wait for the legislation to come as it's happening in human rights now, and all the politics and everyone to agree on the definition and to get the data, or you can just start. So we are starting, but we are very humble that we don't have the answer. And hence we need to work with technology, but also collaborating with others to define what we think is right. And some of my peers are here, and we are together defining what we think is the right approach. I can't tell you if it's right, but it's better than doing nothing, so we're trying. And I think on the S, on sustainability, there are more science-based target and more technical definition. So you know what you have to achieve. How we achieve it, again, is very based to our product and what we are buying in a product. So to use the tomato example again, if you really want to track your CO2, you can't go only to India or a supplier. You need to go up to your tomato. So it's a challenge, and data will help us, but not only. I think collaboration will be the key solution.
So Gregor, as you think of all the data sets you can incorporate into a supplier profile for search or whatever criteria it's going to be used for, how do you think about diversity and sustainability data as a component of the broader picture of supplier data?
Yeah, good question. So as Alex already said, you have to start at a given moment, right? You probably cannot wait for legislation to happen and tell you exactly what kind of data components you will need. And even if so, those things are ever changing. And the need also is ever changing. What you also see right now is also, this conference also exists because the startup ecosystem and the data ecosystem is exploding. If you take a look at how many ESG data providers are now out there and how many different ESG data points, that was probably like 200, 300 times less than it was back in 2000. And the hot topics right now are, of course, diversity certification, etc. But now, just the day before yesterday, the EU announced that they are going to ban products that were produced with forced labor. And you can be sure that this is not just a statement, but there will be a legislation and a work process behind it. And first and foremost, in the end, also data again. So what data you need and what data you have is, in the end, probably not really relevant. You need simply to be able to interact with it. You need to be able to spot relevant data and bring it in. And maybe a more tangible example is also COVID data. So the COVID data set was one of the most and best accessible data sets in the world. It was all sitting there with an API, etc. Nevertheless, procurement, until today still, was not able to utilize the data in a meaningful way. You could have easily forecasted what kind of areas would go into a lockdown and see how would that affect my supply chain. But the reason why procurement wasn't using the data is because they had no data capabilities. And that is also holding back the effort. So as Alex said, they have to start, but they also have to start investing in the capability to interact with data in general, else they will always have this barrier in front of them where they feel like they cannot get moving anyway, because as soon as you start trying to match 10, 15 different types of certificates to a tier 1 and tier 2, we're talking here about millions of data sets and data points. If you do not have a system in place that solves that for you, then you just don't start, you are stalled.
And Nicole, kind of putting it in the context of probably the biggest energy revolution, since the invention of the combustion engine at this point, and you look at how Siemens Energy customers are transitioning to different types of capability. And, it's funny to go back and forth reading in the FT or The Economist how nuclear is not green, then it's green. And you've got to support, obviously, many different types of systems with many different types of suppliers. Lithium hit an all-time high yesterday. There's not enough supply. So I'm just curious how you think about data, and especially broader data sets in the context of the efforts you support.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we are striving more in this new energy business, which we call it. Yeah, it's the decarbonization topic all over it, and we have our new H2 power plants where we are investing in. It's more R&D, and so this is what we are doing there. And with that, yeah, this sounds all very green and in a green way. This is right, and also the supply chain need to be green because customer ask for it, yeah, and they will ask in future more for it. And all what you said before, yeah, that's right. What we need in our business is to have a tag on it. How much is it, and is our customer willing to pay for it at the end? Yeah, and if that is the case, then it's a good way for the whole world and for our future, yeah, to do this ESG in the right way. And but I think that's a long way we have to go, and maybe the more developed countries are a little bit further developed on that side, yeah, and the others have to follow. So absolutely true, and we put it in our DNA as well. The ESG is a little bit in baby shoes still, yeah, but some are further, sustainability is a little bit further developed, so we are doing quite well if we get connected with companies who have knowledge on that, with other companies how are doing that, and then find a solution for all of us, yeah.
So my next question is really for the panel on how do you best combine internal and external data sets? And I guess the ultimate question is there are so many external providers of supplier data, and especially if we look at carbon, you know, there are a dozen providers popping up, and even as a research firm, it's hard to cover them all. And so how do you think about combining internal and external data? And kind of the follow-up up to that would be, is there competitive advantage data which you can develop internally? So start with Alexandra.
It's a big question. There are a couple of things we need to do on data. I think we need to simplify it. And when I mean data, I mean also data provider. I mean, something for Matthias, maybe if someone can map all the supplier being here for the 2 days and just do a map about who I use where for what, it will be brilliant. Because we're all convinced here, but when you go back to your organization, I'm not sure they understand where we're all doing together. So I don't know if Matthias is here, but it's something we need to do. So now we need to explain and simplify why we're using data for, and why I'm using Scoutbee for, and why we use, you know, a whisk method for. I'm just sitting somewhere working with. And we have to explain that internally, and then more importantly, we need to explain that to my 56,000 suppliers, and they all have a very different level of maturity and resource and understanding. So yes, we need to do, you know, digital capability, training, education, but there is urgency now to simplify this model. And then the other thing, which is really for me a big call to action to all of us, is that we need to find a solution to openly share data and get data free of access, especially when we talk social and carbon and nature. So we are trying, we're piloting many tools thanks to COVID. I mean, I can't say that, but because of the pandemic, because of COVID, we've been able to test some tools, we've been able to test some integration. We again launched Scoutbee and working with Scoutbee now on future things that you probably don't have the answer. We don't have the answer, but we're looking. But for me, the thing that keeps me awake at night is that we need to translate it to a supplier that can then fill a file and get something out of it. And I think we're still not there as a community.
Gregor, so how do you think about the world of internal and external data within your clients? And obviously, you're an intermediary. You're an application provider, but you're also bringing these different data sets together.
Yeah. So we have now performed tens of thousands of scouting over the last couple of years, and all this data was flowing into one centralized pool where we understood how supplier data is structured. How do companies think about supplier features, products, material groups, categories, certificates, and all of that. And the one thing that we have learned, you have to put the supplier at the core. You have to put the supplier profile at the core. It's like the one thing that you have to learn. Stop trying to get different clusters of data, like put your supplier profile at the core of it. And then the challenge is really about matching external records to the internal record. It's that easy, right? So you just have to nail that. That's unfortunately super complicated, or fortunately for us, because we have cracked it. And the superpower that we have is aggregating tons of data from hundreds of thousands of different of systems and making sure that the right data set is merged to the right supplier. And that is right now also holding people back on, let's say, playing around with the data ecosystem. Let's take Dun & Bradstreet. They are a good data provider and everybody's using them, but as soon as you feel like, okay, there's a certain data gap, for example, in China or Asia, bringing in a new data provider is now super difficult. Why? Because you have mapped in a huge process over 6 to 9 months probably all your data to this Dun & Bradstreet record, to this DUNS number, and now bringing in a new one is just too costly and too inefficient. So if you would have a system like Scoutbee, for example, that helps you to simply connect to any data point out there, maps it to the right supplier profile, you're much more agile. And then you can also deal with the ever-growing ecosystem, and you can make sure that, as Alex said it, that you probably can engage faster with startups, with new data providers, and we are completely agnostic. And I'm very, very confident that also this community here will figure this out over the next, maybe already 1 or 2 years, what data is needed, where data is out there. You cannot hack data, it's there or not. What we can make sure is that you can connect to it.
And Nicole?
I think just to maybe hang on your points here, the important thing of all these data is that you can read it, that you have experts who are really knowledgeable about putting it in the right context, putting it together, also with the suppliers to gather the data and interpret it right, for new innovations with the suppliers. This is something which we have to invest more in, to get the people knowledgeable to make the correct decisions at the end out of that. And that's a big thing, and I think that helps at the end a lot.
So as we close, we'll do a rapid round. So 20-second or less responses. The next 6 months, what are going to be the most important data sets you look at?
For me, very many. Supply diversity is a big one, and it's a big one because also the complexity and the legal aspect of it is quite complex on what we can track or not. So I would say supply diversity and Scope 3 also continue to be a big challenge.
Across your clients, I'm curious, Gregor.
Yeah, I think it actually would be data abstraction. I think there will be a lot of data coming in regarding inflation, risk, resilience, and so on. I think it's about now to get the right records in and abstract it to a layer that a human can read and understand it, and you can translate it. I think we will see that companies will come up with a bunch of risk metrics that is combining different data streams to like one indicator that helps them understand where they are in the game.
I think that we need more connection together, to more collaborate together on that topic, to find it out, how we can solve it, how we can go along with it. And that's what I will strive for in my company, to bring it to internal guys as well, to incorporate the external ones.
Great. Well, thank you, Alexandra, Gregor, and Nicole.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.